A big convoy hit Ottawa this week. United We Roll rolled into downtown Ottawa with a powerful message for the Trudeau Liberals to better support our energy sector, among other things. Joining me now from Ottawa is one of our regular contributors, Brian Lilley. Brian, it wasn't only truckers and farmers from Western Canada at the rally, but also allies from Ontario, Quebec, and even the Maritimes.
Yeah, lots of flags from Alberta and Saskatchewan. And of course, it all began in Red Deer and rolled across the prairies into Ontario and then down to the nation's capital in Ottawa. But, Hal, as I walked along, I came up to Ottawa on Wednesday morning for the Liberal caucus meeting and to cover all that, but also because of the convoy. I mean, it was kind of a double reason for coming back to Ottawa and to look into this. And I'm walking along and I keep the trucks are honking constantly, and I know you had video of that and that going on. But when they weren't just honking their horns to send their message, I'd be getting people yelling out at me or honking, "Brian, come on over here!" And I met people from Miramichi, New Brunswick, South Mountain, Ontario, Saskatoon, Saskatchewan, Red Deer, Alberta, all over the place. And one guy told me that yeah, he used to work out in the oil patch, but he's back home now in New Brunswick. And when he heard about the convoy and somebody said, we should go, he said he turned around and even though it was more than 3,000 kilometers, he knew he had to join the convoy,
Wow.
and he did that. So a lot of allied support coming in. And they blocked off, this area, Wellington Street, right out in front of Parliament Hill. You know it well. They blocked it pretty much from Bank Street to the Chateau Laurier. That is several blocks. It takes you a 5 to 7 minute walk to do that sort of thing. And it was nothing but, one guy showed up. I sat in the tractor of this guy who came up from a farm just south of Ottawa. I sat in his John Deere tractor, and he had a hay wagon behind it. It smelled of manure. We sat and did an interview. And it was heavenly. These guys all had a simple message like, look, get out of the way of the resource sector. Government is stopping the resource sector from thriving in this country, and we need to stop that. Yeah, some other groups tried to tack themselves on, but the main message was about resources and resource development in this country. And I know the NDP heard the message. I know the Conservatives heard the message. Justin Trudeau may have been occupied with other things. He did not go out to meet them. He did not go out to talk to them.
Any MPs come out at all?
Yeah, plenty of MPs came out, especially on the Conservative side. I believe some New Democrats did as well. But yeah, people went out. Tom Kimmick, Conservative MP, he came out and was delivering coffee. He showed up with a big tray from Timmy's with the big jug you pour out of. You get the coffee cups to go and all of that, and Timbits, and he was walking along the route doing that. So yeah, lots of MPs coming out to talk to them. Andrew Scheer actually speaking to the crowd. I believe that was Tuesday before I showed up. But this is going to be an issue. I know that the politics in central Canada, in Ottawa, and official Ottawa is very focused on one thing right now. But the message from this convoy is going to be something that resonates with a lot of voters across the country, and not just on the prairies, but as I said, they're allies across central and eastern Canada as well, because as much as the resource industry is centered in Western Canada, guess what? A lot of those pickup trucks that you buy to go to the campsites, to go to the work sites, a lot of the heavy equipment used in mining, in oil and gas construction, guess where it's built? Ontario. And some people here actually get that.
So, Brian, the chat around the water coolers wasn't just about the convoy, but when is former Justice Minister Jody Wilson-Raybould going to speak in regards to the SNC-Lavalin affair? She wants to tell her side of the story, but Brian, will she get the chance?
Yeah, this is what kept Justin Trudeau from talking to absolutely anybody about anything all week. I mean, look, he lost a cabinet minister, he lost his former principal secretary, all of that. And on Wednesday, there was a vote on an opposition motion. The NDP had put forward a motion, and it was supported by the Conservatives, calling for a public inquiry into everything that's gone down around this, the SNC-Lavalin affair. Was there undue pressure put on the attorney general? Was there attempt to get a sweetheart deal for this well-connected company? Was there obstruction of justice? These are the types of questions that a public inquiry would be able to answer. But the Liberals said, no, we're not going to vote for this. But just before that vote, Jody Wilson-Raybould stood up and said that she would not vote on this because she felt that it was wrong for her to vote, given that it was very much about her personally. It was also very much about the prime minister personally, but she said she couldn't vote on this, that she would not vote on this, and but said she hopes that soon she will be able to, and I quote, speak my truth. That's going to leave a lot of people wondering next Monday, maybe Tuesday, what's going to happen with this. So a lot of speculation around that. But shortly after she made those comments, Al, Justin Trudeau stood up and led the Liberals in voting that down because even though the motion was very much about him and his office, he saw no problem standing up and saying, "We don't need to talk about this. Move along."
Now, the SNC-Lavalin scandal is starting to really wear on the Trudeau Liberals. Like you mentioned, they lost their cabinet minister, the key advisor, and Jerry Butts, and support at the polls is also slipping quite a bit.
Yeah, well, when you start losing a cabinet minister and a guy who's been at the prime minister's side for almost 30 years, remember, they met at McGill University, as we discussed the other day. They met at McGill University in the early 90s. This is an almost 30-year relationship of being side by side through their various political incarnations of their political careers. And now he's gone. Uh, Canadians who may not regularly pay attention to politics go, wait a minute, you're losing key people? What's this scandal? What's it all about? And so, two polls in a couple of days. You've had the Ipsos poll and now a Leger poll, both saying the Conservatives are ahead of the Liberals on this, that the Liberals are losing support over this, that they're, Trudeau, in terms of his, does he make the best prime minister? The Leger poll says, well, he's down 7 points. He's at 26% say he'd make the best prime minister. That's down 7 points since November. The Ipsos poll has his approval rating for his government lower than Donald Trump's approval rating. I mean, stick that in your pipe and smoke it, as my grandfather would say. These are numbers that should have every Liberal worried. And I can tell you, standing outside of the Liberal caucus meeting, Hal, on Wednesday, a lot of worried faces.
So this is all about damage control for Justin Trudeau and the Liberals. How can they turn things around? I mean, they can't let Jody Wilson-Raybould speak, but at the same time, they really have to allow her to speak. Canadians want some answers here.
Well, I think what they want to do, because we saw this bizarre thing happen on Tuesday of this week. They'd been against her speaking. No, we can't hear from her. No attorney-client privilege. Then suddenly she goes into a cabinet meeting. She's no longer in cabinet, but she spoke to cabinet. Then she sat in the front benches during question period, where the cabinet normally sits. Then the Liberals come out and say, yeah, we want to invite her to speak at committee. You start to wonder, okay, is there a deal going on? Is something happening? Was Jerry Butts' head on a platter, to use the biblical imagery of John the Baptist? Was that her price? Well, maybe, could be. So there's going to be a lot of people watching for her appearance. But then on the other side, she's still talking as if she can't speak because she's bound by attorney-client privilege or solicitor-client privilege. So, will she actually say anything when she appears? Likely early next week. As I said, Monday or Tuesday of next week, she is likely going to be appearing before committee. Will she even be able to say anything? She says she's still talking to her lawyer. So many layers to this story and so much going on, and we haven't even talked about the fact that this is all about allegations of political corruption in the prime minister's office to do with a trial about, well, political corruption in another country by a Canadian company.
Now, the Liberal caucus tried to sell a message of unity after their weekly meeting. Brian, you were there. Are you buying really what the Liberals are selling?
No, not at all. That's the short answer. Look, people were coming out. Marianne Miachuk, she's Manitoba MP. She used to be in cabinet. She was the original Labour minister, one of the first people to be shuffled out. She said, "Oh, yeah, no, we're a great team full of individuals." What's that? Mark Miller, another one of Trudeau's besties. He and Gerald Butts and Justin Trudeau have been best friends since McGill's part of that McGill mafia that gets discussed around Ottawa. He said, "Oh, it was all very respectful, but nobody was buying it." And maybe the most accurate description walking out was longtime Liberal MP John McKay out of Toronto. And John's been around since the Chrétien era in the '90s, and John's walking out of caucus. He's got his overcoat on, just slinking by reporters. "How was it in there?" And he said, "Everything's fine." He sounded like a kid that'd been told, "Go eat your Brussels sprouts." Like nobody's believing that the kid wants to eat the Brussels sprouts. He's just been told he's got to. John didn't sound believable. And by the way, on that motion that we spoke about earlier on the public inquiry, two Liberal MPs broke ranks. Uh, Nathaniel Erskine Smith out of Toronto and Wayne Long out of New Brunswick both voted with the opposition to say, you know what, we need a public inquiry. So there is dissension in the Liberal ranks. There's worry in the Liberal ranks over how the PM's been handling this, how his office has been handling this, and whether the allegations are true.
Yeah, this story isn't going away anytime soon. Brian, the Trudeau Liberals will table their new budget on March the 19th, and they're talking of providing pharmacare while being fiscally responsible. Now, this is something Federal Finance Minister Bill Morneau had trouble explaining when quizzed by reporters. Tell me more about that.
Well, and I was one of the reporters because it comes out and he makes this statement. Okay, we're going to table the budget on March 19th, and we want to have a discussion about pharmacare and being fiscally responsible. Well, wait a minute. How do you start a pharmacare program? Basically, how does the federal government take over responsibility for paying for all of your prescription drugs, all of the prescription drugs of everybody across Canada, or even a portion of that, without spending, as I put it to the minister? I said, that's going to cost a canoe full of money. That's a lot of cash. How can you say you're going to be fiscally responsible and bring in a new massive social program? And by the way, one that infringes on provincial jurisdiction, and that would cause a lot of fights with the provinces, but maybe that's a story for another day. Bill Morneau was probably asked 3 or 4 times in his very brief appearance before reporters that very question. And he just kept saying, we need to have a discussion about this. We need to do this and be fiscally responsible. Couldn't be budged off his talking point. So my guess is that in the budget on March 19th, they're going to put in that they will bring in a pharmacare plan. They're going to promise you free prescription drugs if you vote for them. It won't actually be a program that will come in before the next election, but it will be in 2020 or 2021, we will have this if you reelect us. But you've got to get us past October 2019.
Let's see how well that worked for Kathleen Wynne in the Ontario Liberals when she promised free meds for anybody under the age of 25. Didn't really work out for her, did it?
No, it didn't. And in fact, the Ford government came in and half repealed that, because what they did was they said, okay, if you've already got prescription drug plan from your employer, then we're no longer paying for your kids' prescription drugs because you're already paying for it. I can tell you, nobody's benefits plan saw a reduction in premiums when the Ontario government brought that in. Everyone was still paying for their kids' drugs, but the company was, just keeping the money. And so they said, if you don't have a prescription drug plan for your kids, the province will still pay for your children, but not for those that have. So it wasn't a huge selling point. I'm not sure how it's going to be because many Canadians don't have a plan, but they can get one through the provincial government. So we probably don't need a federal plan. We just need to maybe some better provincial plans. But a lot of Canadians do have this already through their employers. So I'm not sure what the Liberals are getting at, other than maybe being desperate to change the channel and find a way to get votes for October.
Okay, Brian, we only have a few short moments left here. The CRTC says new rules on sales tactics from telcos are desperately needed. Can you explain that?
Yeah, this is it kind of comes out of a series of stories by CBC, which annoys me, and I'll tell you why. Because CBC has gone after Rogers and Bell, and in full disclosure, I used to work for Bell, but I don't anymore. Over what they say are aggressive sales tactics. Now, I've subscribed to both companies over the years. I've never found overly aggressive sales tactics, but CBC has been on a hunt for this for ages, which is funny because this is a broadcasting company that doesn't have to sell anything. They get it handed to them by the government. But they have done story after story to the point where the CRTC said, we're going to investigate. They came out and they said, yeah, some of the sales tactics are overly aggressive and they're going to look at bringing in rules. I've, dealt with the people on the phone, Hal. I've dealt with people at my front doorstep. I've always gotten a good deal. I've always felt good about the deal, or I don't buy it. But CBC just doesn't like the free market, and they campaigned on this. Now the CRTC is going to give in. I hope that we don't lose the ability to get a good deal and have these people show up and say, "Oh, you're with so and so. Let me tell you what I can do for you." I hope they don't do away with that. Maybe there are some bad apples out there, and we need to take care of that. But for the most part, my experience and the experience of millions of Canadians is you can actually get a better deal by walking across the street and saying to the competition, yeah, I'm not too happy with what I've got now. What do you have for me?
One of our regular contributors, award-winning journalist Brian Lilley, thanks so much for joining me via Skype from Ottawa.
Thank you, Hal.